if I told you the United States had been hunting this man for 19 straight months, put a $5 million bounty on his head, indicted him in federal court in Washington, D.C., and when they finally found him, he was hiding in a drain, not a compound, not a bunker. A drainage ditch in the middle of Nayarit, Mexico, crawling through concrete trying to disappear while 120 elite Special Forces soldiers, 4 combat helicopters, and surveillance aircraft closed in from every direction. But here's the thing nobody's asking. Why did the DEA say this one arrest might actually hurt the CJNG more than when El Mencho himself got killed 2 months earlier? Because El Jardinero wasn't just another cartel boss. He was the man running the entire operation, the supply chains, the meth labs, the airstrips, the cocaine routes from Central America all the way into California, Texas, Virginia, and beyond. El Mencho was the face. This man was the engine keeping everything moving. And now he's in a cell, alive, facing life in a U.S. federal prison. Stay with me until the end of this video, because by the time we're done, you're going to understand exactly how they tracked him down, why losing him might finally break the most powerful drug cartel on the planet, and what happens next. Now, before we get into how this went down, and trust me, the details are wild, you got to understand who Audius Flores Silva actually was. Because most people outside of Mexico and DEA circles had never even heard his name, and that was by design. El Jardinero, which translates to the gardener, wasn't the type of guy making flashy videos or showing up in narco corridos. He was operating in the shadows, running 5 Mexican states, controlling meth labs, clandestine airstrips, and cocaine pipelines stretching all the way from Central America into California, Texas, Illinois, Georgia, and Virginia. This man was the infrastructure of CJNG, the guy who kept the machine running. El Mencho was the face. El Jardinero was the engine. And the moment El Mencho got killed in February 2026, every intelligence agency in North America had one question: who fills that vacuum? El Jardinero was the answer everybody kept coming back to. But here's what really went down, and how 19 months of surveillance, a massive military operation, and one drainage ditch ended it all. Let's rewind way back. Because to understand who El Jardinero is, you got to understand where he came from and how a kid from a small town in Michoacan ended up becoming the number 2 of the most dangerous cartel in the Western Hemisphere. Audius Flores Silva was born November 19th, 1980 in Huéramo, a small municipality in the western state of Michoacan. Now, Michoacan, for those who don't know, has been cartel territory for decades. It's the state that basically birthed modern Mexican organized crime. The La Familia Michoacana, the Knights Templar, Los Zetas activity. Michoacan has been a battlefield for cartel power for as long as anyone can remember. Growing up there in the 80s and 90s, the cartel life wasn't some distant thing you heard about on the news. It was the reality on the street. So it's no surprise that Flores Silva got caught up early. What is surprising is how young he was when he first caught a case in the United States. At some point in his early criminal career, he was arrested on U.S. soil and convicted of drug trafficking. He served 5 years in an American prison. 5 years. Most guys come out of that kind of stretch and lay low, maybe get out the game. Not El Jardinero. He did his 5 years, walked out, and went straight back to Mexico, and straight back to work. By the time he linked up with CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel was already one of the fastest rising criminal organizations in Mexico. Founded around 2009 to 2010 as a splinter from the Milenio Cartel, CJNG was built on extreme violence and military-style discipline. Their leader, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, was a former Guadalajara cartel associate and ex-cop who ran his organization like an army. rocket-propelled grenades, armed drones, armored convoys. El Mencho was building something different from the traditional cartels, and he needed people around him who could operate at that level. El Jardinero fit the profile perfectly. He became El Mencho's security chief, his personal bodyguard, the guy responsible for keeping the most wanted man in North America alive. Think about what that job requires: counter-surveillance, route planning, managing a network of lookouts, identifying informants, coordinating safe houses. You don't get that role because you're just loyal. You get it because you're sharp, disciplined, and ruthless. And Flores Silva was all three. Over time, he graduated from security chief to regional commander. El Mencho trusted him enough to hand him control of Nayarit, Jalisco, Zacatecas, Michoacán, and Guerrero. That's not a small assignment. That's a huge chunk of the Mexican Pacific coast and interior, covering major drug production zones and trafficking corridors. Journalist Raimundo Riva Palacio, one of the top organized crime reporters in Mexico, described El Jardinero as the Lord of Puerto Vallarta, the epicenter of CJNG power on the Pacific coast. Puerto Vallarta, for context, is a major international tourist destination. Having that kind of control in a city that visible tells you everything about how embedded CJNG was in the region, and how untouchable El Jardinero felt. This is where things started getting serious. Now here's where it gets crazy, because El Jardinero wasn't just running territory quietly. This man was leaving a trail. In April 2015, a brutal ambush went down in Soyatlan, Jalisco. Mexican police officers were targeted in a coordinated attack, the kind of brazen hit that sends a message not just to law enforcement, but to any rival thinking about moving into CJNG space. Flores Silva was identified as the person responsible for organizing that ambush. In 2016, Mexican authorities caught up with him and arrested him for his alleged role in that attack. He went in. But here's where it gets real. He came back out. Released not long after. No trial, no conviction, just released. That's not unusual in Mexico, where cartel money and corruption run deep through local and federal institutions. But it tells you something about the level of protection El Jardinero had around him. While Mexican authorities were catching and releasing him, the United States was watching closely. The DEA had been building intelligence on Audius Flores Silva for years. By 2020, they had enough. On August 13, 2020, a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. handed down a formal indictment charging him with 3 counts: conspiracy to distribute 5 kilograms or more of cocaine for importation into the United States, conspiracy to distribute 1 kilogram or more of heroin for importation into the United States, and possession and use of a firearm in connection with a drug trafficking crime. No cap. Those aren't minor charges. That's a potential life sentence in a federal penitentiary. The U.S. was not playing. But it wasn't just the indictment. In April 2021, the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, officially sanctioned Audius Flores Silva. What that means is they froze any U.S.-connected assets, made it illegal for Americans to do business with him, and officially designated him as a major drug trafficking threat. That same year, the State Department announced a $5 million reward for information leading to his arrest or conviction. $5 million. Think about that. The U.S. doesn't throw that kind of money around for street-level operators. That bounty puts El Jardinero in the same category as some of the most wanted individuals on the planet. By this point, El Jardinero had also expanded his operation way beyond just muscle and territory. He was running an entire logistics empire. Intelligence documents revealed he controlled clandestine airstrips and private aircraft for moving drugs. He had cargo trucks transporting cocaine from Central America up through Mexico. He ran passenger vehicles distributing product to CJNG distribution cells across the United States: California, Texas, Illinois, Georgia, Washington, Virginia. And he controlled meth labs in central Jalisco and southern Zacatecas, cooking fentanyl and methamphetamine that was flowing directly into American cities. And as if that wasn't enough, a June 2025 Treasury sanctions document revealed he was also linked to a timeshare fraud network operating in Nayarit under CJNG authority. So this man was running drugs, running guns, running labs, running airstrips, and running fraud schemes targeting American tourists. The guy was diversified. But here's what's really important to understand about this period. From 2021 to 2024, while the bounty was on his head and the U.S. was hunting him, El Jardinero was still operating freely in Nayarit. He had ranchos, actual ranches, in the municipalities of Ahuacatlan and Ixtlan del Rio. In 2022, Mexican authorities raided properties connected to him and seized luxury vehicles and mansions under construction. They designated him a priority target back in 2022, and he was still out there. That's how protected this man was. That's how deeply the CJNG had penetrated the local power structure in Nayarit. Fast forward to February 22nd, 2026, and everything changes. February 22nd, 2026. Tapalpa, Jalisco, a mountain town inside a gated country club community. Mexican Special Forces, working with U.S. intelligence through a joint task force called JITC-CC, the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter Cartel, had been tracking El Mencho's movements through a trusted associate connected to one of his romantic partners. On February 20th, surveillance picked up the associate transporting the partner to a residence inside the Tapalpa Country Club. She met with El Mencho, then left. He stayed. That was the confirmation they needed. On the morning of February 22nd, before sunrise, Special Forces moved in on foot. 2 military helicopters provided aerial support. As troops approached the compound, CJNG gunmen opened fire with high-caliber weapons and heavy firearms. This wasn't a small security detail. El Mencho's people were ready to fight. During the initial firefight, several cartel members were killed. El Mencho and 4 members of his personal security detail broke from the main compound and ran into the surrounding wooded terrain. A Special Forces team split off and pursued him. A second gunfight erupted in the woods. One of the military helicopters was struck by gunfire during the chase. El Mencho was shot during that second engagement. He didn't die immediately. He was transported, but he died en route to Mexico City. By the time the sun came up on February 22nd, the most powerful cartel boss in the Western Hemisphere since Pablo Escobar was gone. What followed was immediate and nationwide. CJNG members launched coordinated retaliation attacks across 22 Mexican states. Vehicles hijacked and burned, roads blocked, gas stations attacked, small businesses set on fire, armed confrontations with security forces in multiple locations. In the first days alone, 25 Mexican National Guard soldiers were killed in 6 separate confrontations in Jalisco. More than 70 people total died in the wave of violence that followed. Multiple airlines canceled flights into Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and Mazatlan. Schools were shut down across several states. People locked themselves in their homes in Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city. It was a full demonstration of CJNG's reach and operational power, even in the immediate aftermath of losing their leader. Now here's where El Jardinero becomes central to the story. El Mencho had no clear successor lined up. His son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, was sitting in a federal prison in the United States. The direct family line of succession was broken before it could even begin. Mexico City security consultant David Saucedo told CNN that because of this, the line of succession has been broken, with no clear path forward. Into that vacuum stepped several names, and El Jardinero was at the top of every list. He had the territorial control. 5 states. He had the operational experience. Former security chief, former bodyguard, seasoned commander. He had the relationships, years of working directly alongside El Mencho. And according to journalist Riva Palacio, in the immediate aftermath of El Mencho's death, El Jardinero was the one who held Puerto Vallarta, described as the epicenter of the violence that erupted across the country. That kind of control, in the most volatile moment, tells you who had real power on the ground. Eventually, by mid-March 2026, reporting out of the Wall Street Journal and later confirmed by El País in April, indicated that Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, El Mencho's stepson, had emerged as the new CJNG leader. But El Jardinero's role in that transition period? Still an open question. Was he a loyalist supporting Valencia? Was he positioning himself as a rival? Intelligence agencies on both sides of the border were watching carefully. What nobody was saying publicly, but what was happening behind the scenes, was that those 19 months of surveillance on El Jardinero were still running. The clock was already ticking, and the Mexican Navy was getting ready to move. April 27, 2026, Nayarit, Mexico. This was not a spontaneous operation. This was not a tip that came in overnight. This was the product of 19 months of continuous surveillance. The Mexican Navy Samar Special Forces, coordinated with the Ministry of Security and the Federal Attorney General's office, methodically building the picture of where El Jardinero was, how he moved, who was around him, and when the window would open. Think about what 19 months of surveillance looks like. It means tracking communications. It means running informants inside or near his network. It means aerial reconnaissance over his known properties in Ahuacatlan and Ixtlan del Rio. It means mapping the movements of his security detail. It means knowing his patterns well enough to predict when and where he'd be vulnerable. Former DEA Chief of International Operations Mike Vigil, speaking to Mexican media after the arrest, praised the operation and specifically called out the Mexican Navy's intelligence work. And for real? The scale of what they deployed tells you exactly how seriously they took this target. For one man, here is what SAMAR brought to the field: ISR aircraft, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance planes running eyes in the sky, 4 close support helicopters, 2 troop transport helicopters, 4 fixed-wing aircraft, 120 direct-action ground troops, elite special forces, not regular military, and an additional 400 naval support personnel staged in surrounding areas. That is an operation you run against a small army. Not because they expected El Jardinero to fight them with that kind of force, but because they knew his security detail was significant. They knew the terrain was tough, and they were not leaving any margin for error or escape. When the operation launched, the tactical picture unfolded fast. As SEMAR Special Forces moved into the target area, El Jardinero's escort, his bodyguards, immediately executed a classic evasion tactic. They scattered. Each one ran in a different direction, deliberately trying to create confusion about which person was the actual target, splitting the pursuing forces and hopefully creating a window for the main man to slip away. It's a smart move. It's the kind of counter-surveillance protocol that gets drilled into high-value protection details. And against a smaller, less coordinated force, it might have worked. But here's where it gets real. SEMAR wasn't chasing blind. They had aerial tracking running simultaneously with ground pursuit. The ISR aircraft overhead gave them a bird's-eye view of everyone's movement in real time. So while the bodyguards scattered, operators in the air were tracking each heat signature, each moving figure, narrowing down which one wasn't running like someone in a panic, which one was moving like someone trying to hide. And they found him. Audias Flores Silva, El Jardinero, the number 2 of the CJNG, the man with a $5 million US bounty on his head, the man who had been running 5 Mexican states, the man who walked away from a Mexican arrest in 2016 and kept climbing, was found crawling into a drainage ditch, trying to hide in a concrete drainage channel in the Nayarit countryside. Not a single shot fired by either side. The government was explicit about this. The operation was executed with 0 casualties, 0 injuries, 0 collateral damage. Completely surgical. Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch posted on X immediately after. In a planned, developed, and executed operation by the Secretariat of the Navy, through its special forces, Audias Flores Silva, alias El Jardinero, was detained in Nayarit. He has an arrest warrant in Mexico and is also sought by United States authorities for extradition purposes. For his capture, the U.S. government offered a reward of $5 million. The United States responded fast. Former DEA Assistant Special Agent in Charge Carlos Olivo, a CJNG expert, told Reuters, his arrest will have a bigger effect on CJNG operations than Mencho being taken out. Read that again. A DEA expert said losing El Jardinero hurts the CJNG more than losing El Mencho. And the cartel's response confirmed exactly how significant this was. Within minutes of the announcement, Nayarit started burning. Convenience stores and supermarkets set on fire in Tecuala, a municipality in northern Nayarit, near the Sinaloa border. A large cargo truck torched on the highway near Ahuacatlan, El Jardinero's own territory, creating roadblocks. Federal forces immediately deployed across the state to contain the situation. Same playbook they ran when El Mencho died. Just faster this time. So what does all of this actually mean? For CJNG, for Mexico, for the United States, and for anyone paying attention to how this war on cartels is actually being fought right now? Let's break it down. Because here's what a lot of people get wrong about these kinds of arrests. The first reaction is always the same. It doesn't matter. Someone else will just take their place. And look, for real, that's not entirely wrong. The cartel isn't going to dissolve because one leader got caught. The drug demand in the United States doesn't disappear. The money doesn't stop flowing. But that thinking misses the real impact of what happened here. And it misses why the U.S. was willing to put a $5 million bounty on this specific individual. El Jardinero wasn't just a boss, he was infrastructure. He was the man who personally oversaw the supply chain, from cocaine moving up from Central America in cargo trucks, to product being cooked in clandestine labs in Jalisco and Zacatecas, to distribution cells receiving shipments in California, Texas, Illinois, Georgia, Virginia, and Washington. He supervised the clandestine airstrips. He managed the aircraft. He maintained the relationships with the distribution networks inside the United States. That level of operational knowledge doesn't get replaced overnight with a phone call. You don't just promote the next guy and keep the machine running smoothly. Every person in that supply chain now has to figure out who they report to, whether their operation is compromised, whether El Jardinero already cooperated with authorities during or after his arrest, and whether they're next. That's not just disruptive. That's paralyzing for an organization that's already in a leadership transition, and the timing could not be worse for CJNG. Think about what's happened to this organization in just the past few months. El Mencho, killed February 22nd, after years as the most hunted man in North America. His right-hand man, El Tuli, tracked down and killed the same day El Mencho died. And now El Jardinero, arrested April 27th, barely 2 months later. 3 of the most significant figures in the CJNG leadership structure, gone in under 70 days. Meanwhile, the cartel is trying to establish new leadership under Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, El Mencho's stepson. Valencia Gonzalez is described in reporting as having successfully worked through the post-Mencho power vacuum to consolidate control by early April. But consolidating power in a criminal organization and actually running an empire as complex and widespread as the CJNG are two very different things. Valencia Gonzalez is inheriting an organization that is already fractured, already under pressure, and now missing one of its most experienced operational commanders. CSIS analysts laid out the possible futures for CJNG back in February 2026, and every scenario they described is looking more likely now. Either the cartel consolidates around a single leader, which becomes harder with each arrest, or it fractures and enters an internal civil war, with regional commanders battling for territory. That second scenario is exactly what happened to the Sinaloa cartel after Ismael Zambada was captured. It collapsed into brutal factional warfare that's still playing out. Former DEA Chief Mike Vigil made that exact point after El Jardinero's arrest. He noted that when key figures like this go down, it typically triggers internal disputes between cells, exactly as the Sinaloa fracture showed. The difference is, the Sinaloa cartel had been weakened over years before that happened. CJNG is experiencing multiple simultaneous blows while still trying to reorganize. For Mexico, the significance of this moment goes beyond just the cartel. These two operations, El Mencho in February, El Jardinero in April, represent a level of U.S.-Mexico security cooperation that is genuinely unprecedented in recent history. The threat of unilateral U.S. military action inside Mexico, which was very real in early 2026, appears to have pushed Mexico to act decisively, and so far, they have. The question now is whether El Jardinero gets extradited to the United States. He has a standing federal indictment in Washington, D.C. The U.S. has formally requested extradition. The extradition process in Mexico can take months to years. But given the political climate and the level of U.S. pressure on the Sheinbaum government right now, it's hard to imagine this one getting stalled indefinitely. And if he gets to the U.S., the federal prosecutors in D.C. already have their case built. The DEA has years of intelligence on his networks. The Treasury has documented his financial operations, and there's always the possibility. The thing that makes cartel organizations most nervous about senior figures being taken alive? That he cooperates. El Jardinero sitting in a U.S. federal facility, facing a potential life sentence, knowing the names of every distribution cell operator from California to Virginia, every corrupt official in Nayarit, every CJNG commander across those 5 states. That's a walking encyclopedia of cartel intelligence. That's why the DEA experts said this arrest might hurt more than El Mencho's death. Because El Mencho died, he can't talk. El Jardinero is alive, in custody, and facing the rest of his life in prison if he doesn't make a deal. Here's the bottom line. The story of Audias Flores Silva, El Jardinero, is the story of how a kid from Huetamo, Michoacán, built himself into one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the Western Hemisphere. He went from serving time in a U.S. prison to becoming the personal bodyguard of the most wanted man in North America. He built a drug empire spanning 5 Mexican states and reaching into 6 U.S. states. He survived 2 arrests, one in the United States, one in Mexico, and kept climbing. And in the end, after 19 months of surveillance, after a massive military operation involving over 500 personnel and multiple aircraft, he was found hiding in a drainage ditch. No shootout, no last stand, just a man trying to disappear into the earth and failing. The CJNG is not finished. That would be naive to say. An organization this wealthy, this violent, and this deeply embedded in Mexican institutions does not fall because of 2 months of bad news. But they are wounded. They are in transition. They are losing their most experienced people faster than they can replace them. And the United States and Mexico are, for the first time in a long time, genuinely working together to press that advantage. Whether they sustain that pressure, whether the political will holds on both sides of the border, whether corruption gets addressed at the institutional level, those are the questions that will determine whether February and April 2026 are remembered as a turning point or just another chapter. But for right now, El Jardinero is in custody, and the most sophisticated drug trafficking operation in the world just lost its engine. If you made it this far, you already know more about this story than 99% of people watching the news. Drop a comment below. Do you think CJNG survives this, or does it fracture? And subscribe, because we're going to keep tracking how this story develops. This is far from over.